Look closely at this photograph. Do not just glance at it. Analyze it with the cold, unforgiving eye of a forensic engineer. The year is 1893. The location is Chicago. You are looking at the world's Columbian Exposition, commonly known as the White City. According to the official historical ledger, over 100,000 incandescent lamps are illuminating a massive, temporary metropolis of pristine neoclassical palaces. We are instructed by modern academia to believe that this was the era of horses, mud, and intense, brutal manual labor. This was a time when the vast majority of the human population still relied on whale oil, tallow candles, and highly hazardous gas lamps just to push back the darkness. Yet here in Chicago, seemingly out of nowhere, an entire metropolis is flooded with perfectly stable, brilliantly white artificial light. Look at the skyline. There is no visible chaotic grid of heavy-duty wiring strung between these pristine domes to carry the immense current required for such a staggering display. The official historical narrative claims this was simply a miracle of early alternating current power, rapidly wired together by George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla in a few short months to win a contract against Thomas Edison. But when we strip away the romance of the history books and conduct a rigid logistical audit of the supply chain, the manufacturing capabilities, and the structural engineering of the late 19th century, the mathematics completely collapse. What you are looking at is not the birth of the modern electrical grid. It is the final grand display of a hijacked technology. Welcome to TitanMetrics. Let us open the ledger.
Let us begin with the raw logistics of illumination. To light the 1893 World's Fair, the Westinghouse Electric Company had to produce, deliver, and install over 100,000 double-stopper incandescent lamps. Let us audit the fragility of that payload. These were not modern, durable LED bulbs. These were primitive glass vacuums containing highly fragile, hair-thin carbonized filaments. It is not merely about unbroken glass. It is about the vacuum seal. The Westinghouse double-stopper lamps required a perfect internal vacuum to prevent the carbon filaments from instantly vaporizing. Transporting 100,000 primitive, hand-sealed vacuum chambers across the country on unsprung, rigid wooden railway cars and horse-drawn freight wagons guarantees microscopic seal fractures. The catastrophic failure rate upon ignition would have been absolute. But the glass bulbs are merely the easiest part of the mathematical equation. To power 100,000 bulbs over a sprawling 690-acre site using the primitive, newly invented alternating current generators of the 1890s requires an infrastructure of copper wiring so massive it defies industrial belief. Electricity is a physical force. It requires a physical medium to travel. To wire 690 acres for high-load, continuous illumination requires hundreds of tons of high-purity copper. It requires hundreds of miles of thick, highly insulated cables, capable of safely carrying high voltage without short-circuiting and burning the supposedly temporary wooden and plaster buildings to the ground. Let us audit the insulation industry of 1893. In the late 19th century, electrical insulation relied heavily on gutta percha, a natural latex extracted from specific trees in Southeast Asia, or primitive, highly flammable cloth wrapped in vulcanized rubber. The massive automated extrusion machines required to uniformly coat hundreds of miles of thick, high-voltage copper wire did not exist at the scale required for a project of this magnitude.
To manufacture, transport, and perfectly install this volume of heavy cabling in a matter of months is a logistical impossibility.
Furthermore, we must audit the physics of transmission loss. Look at the massive generators inside Machinery Hall. While historically impressive, the mathematical reality of Ohm's law and voltage drop over distance is absolute. To push power from a central generator to 100,000 lamps located at the far edges of a 600-acre exposition, you require massive, heavy-duty step-up and step-down transformer substations. The official ledger proudly displays photographs of the Westinghouse step-up transformers inside Machinery Hall. But look at the dates. To design, manufacture, transport, and flawlessly calibrate a highly complex, massive-scale transformer grid of this magnitude in just a few months is an absolute industrial fantasy for 1893. The supply chain timeline is a mathematical impossibility. And what about the fuel required to spin those generators? The official archives eagerly show us their designated coal yards. They point to the fuel depots as proof of the narrative. But run the thermodynamic math. The visual evidence of their fuel supply does not mathematically align with the staggering continuous energy output required to illuminate this city. To maintain that voltage with massive thermal decay, the entire skyline should have been choked in thick, black, toxic soot 24 hours a day, yet the White City remained impossibly pristine. And this architectural anomaly was not isolated to Chicago. From the 1889 and 1900 expositions in Paris, to the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, every few years, a fully formed, flawlessly illuminated, cyclopean city of classical architecture would appear, supposedly built from scratch using horse and buggy logistics, only to be inexplicably demolished, dismantled, or burned to the ground shortly after the lights went out. Why aggressively destroy billions of dollars of perfectly functional cutting-edge infrastructure? Unless the infrastructure wasn't built by them. Unless they were merely occupying, temporarily powering, and then aggressively erasing the remnants of a previous highly advanced age.
To truly understand what was actually powering these monumental structures, we must leave the sanitized realm of modern history and enter the uncompromising realm of physics. Specifically, the physics of atmospheric electricity. This is not pseudoscience. This is not internet fiction. This is a measurable, universally recognized scientific fact utilized by meteorologists and aerospace engineers today. The Earth functions as an immense, spherical capacitor. The surface of the Earth is negatively charged. The upper atmosphere, specifically the ionosphere, is positively charged. Between the ground and the ionosphere exists a constant, highly powerful electric field. In clear weather, the atmospheric voltage gradient is approximately 100 volts for every single meter of elevation. Let me repeat that metric, 100 volts per meter. This dictates that if you stand outside, the air at the top of your head is at an electrical potential of roughly 200 volts compared to the ground at your feet. Why don't you get electrocuted? Because the current, the amperage in clear air, is incredibly low, and the ambient air itself acts as an excellent insulator. The potential is massive, but the circuit is not closed. In the 1850s, decades before Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla became household names, the brilliant physicist Lord Kelvin mathematically proved this. He measured atmospheric electricity using a specialized water-dropping electrometer at the Kew Observatory. Lord Kelvin proved that the higher you go, the more immense the voltage becomes. If you construct a building 100 meters tall, the air at the absolute peak is carrying a potential of 10,000 volts. Now apply this real, measurable, undeniable physics to the architecture of the old world. Open any architectural history book and they will explicitly tell you that the soaring spires, the massive copper domes, the iron tie rods,
and the complex metallic finials crowning 19th century classical architecture were strictly decorative, a mere stylistic choice to make the buildings look grand to the peasantry. But an engineering audit reveals a terrifying functional reality. True high-level engineering has no room for useless multi-ton metal decoration on that massive scale. Form always follows function.
Look at the geometry of the Old World. These structures share a universal fractal symmetry across the entire globe, from the Americas to Europe, to the deepest, most isolated parts of Asia. They share the exact same conductive copper peaks, the exact same geometric precision, and the exact same metallic spikes pointing directly into the ionosphere. They weren't just building churches, state capitals, or city halls. They were constructing massive, passive, atmospheric energy extractors. Antica tech. Let us run a structural analysis of a typical Old World dome. To extract the ambient high voltage of the atmosphere, you require three specific components: an antenna to gather the charge, a dielectric material to store it, and a ground to close the circuit. Look at the top of the building. The metallic spire, often coated in gold or highly conductive copper, acts as the primary antenna. Through the physical principle known as the point discharge effect, sharp metallic points easily ionize the surrounding air, drawing the high voltage gradient directly into the structure. Beneath the spire sits the dome. These domes were almost exclusively clad in heavy copper plates, one of the best electrical conductors on the periodic table. Beneath the conductive copper skin lies massive, dense masonry, solid red brick and limestone. In electrical engineering, stone and brick function as a highly effective dielectric insulator. They act as a massive capacitor, storing the gathered atmospheric charge. And threaded throughout this heavy masonry, driven deep into the foundation, are massive iron tie rods and heavy iron chains. Official history casually dismisses these iron bars, claiming they were just for structural reinforcement against the wind. But physically and electrically, they provide a perfect, uninterrupted grounding wire.
These iron rods lead directly into the earth, often terminating deeply in subterranean aquifers or engineered canals.
Furthermore, observe the geographic placement. The World's Fairs of Chicago, Venice, and Amsterdam are entirely built around intricate networks of water canals. These subterranean, mineral-rich canals and deep aquifers provided the flawless, massive grounding sink required to complete the etheric circuit and safely dissipate the massive atmospheric charge. Antenna, capacitor, ground. The master builders of the Old World understood that if you construct a geodetically aligned building with a sharp metallic spire, a massive conductive copper dome, and a masonry foundation laced with grounded iron dropping into mineral water, you pull free energy directly from the ether. They didn't burn millions of tons of toxic coal to boil water just to spin a primitive magnetic turbine. They didn't string millions of miles of fragile, vulnerable, highly expensive copper wires across continents, losing massive amounts of power to thermal decay. They pulled power directly from the air. It was wireless, it was infinite, and most importantly, it was free.
So, we as auditors are faced with the ultimate question. If humanity previously possessed a global, wireless, free energy grid, seamlessly integrated into the architecture itself, what happened to it? Why did we voluntarily trade infinite, clean atmospheric power for a dirty, highly vulnerable, centralized grid that requires endless physical labor, environmental destruction, and constant fuel extraction? The answer is the oldest and most predictable motive in human history: control. You cannot put a financial meter on the Earth's atmosphere. You cannot charge a citizen a monthly subscription fee for the ambient air they breathe, and you cannot monopolize a free energy grid
that anyone can tap into with a simple metallic antenna. If a city generates its own power passively through its architecture, the financial elite have absolutely nothing to sell. Consider the infamous, documented historical relationship between the brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla and the banking titan J.P. Morgan. Tesla built the massive Wardenclyffe Tower in 1901. It was explicitly designed to transmit wireless energy across the globe by tapping into the Earth's natural resonant frequencies and the atmospheric potential. It was the exact same technological principle utilized by the old world builders, simply modernized and amplified by a singular genius. When J.P. Morgan, a man heavily invested in copper mines, rubber factories, and the burgeoning wired electrical grid, realized that Tesla's system would provide free, unmetered energy to anyone with a simple receiver antenna, he immediately cut all funding. The project was brutally crushed. The tower was dismantled and sold for scrap, and Tesla was intentionally pushed into historical obscurity and financial ruin. The financial empire of the 20th century was being built on copper wire, coal extraction, and artificial scarcity. Free atmospheric energy was a direct existential threat to the very foundation of modern capitalism.
The late 19th century wasn't an era of miraculous, benevolent invention. It was an era of violent, systemic retrofitting. The rising financial elite took complete control of the pre-existing old world infrastructure. They systematically dismantled the atmospheric antennas. They stripped the highly conductive copper from the majestic domes, falsely claiming it was desperately needed for war efforts or modern manufacturing. And what they couldn't retrofit, they destroyed. This is exactly why the magnificent, sprawling, temporary cities of the world's fairs were burned to the ground or aggressively dynamited. It is why major cities across the globe experienced inexplicable, totally devastating fires in the mid to late 19th century. Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle. They were wiping the slate clean. They were destroying the functioning, independent anti-tech so they could forcefully wire these grand surviving buildings into their primitive, centralized, coal-fired grid. They purposefully crippled the original, elegant technology just so they could sell you the cure. They blinded humanity to the immense free power of the atmosphere. They handed us a fragile, burning glass light bulb on the end of a copper wire and told us we were finally moving out of the dark ages. But the mathematical truth is we devolved. We moved from an elegant, wireless, harmonic symbiosis with the earth to a parasitic, highly fragile, fuel-dependent extraction economy.
The evidence of this stolen timeline is hiding in plain sight. The next time you walk through the historic center of any major global city, stop and look up. Look past the modern digital billboards and the ugly tangles of high-voltage power lines. Look at the dead, amputated spires on top of the ancient government buildings, the libraries, and the stone cathedrals. Notice the heavy iron doors, the copper roofing, and the perfect geometric symmetry. You are walking through the stripped and gutted ruins of a global free energy civilization. They didn't build the power grid. They just put a price tag on it. If you think the energy grid is a logistical lie, our audit is just getting started. If they didn't burn millions of tons of coal for electricity, how did they heat these massive stone structures during brutal winters, long before modern HVAC systems existed? Click the video on your screen right now to see the full audit on the 19th century thermal anomaly. Subscribe to the channel. The ledger remains open.